As entrepreneurs, we all have a reason why we chose to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to capture those stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. Joel is the owner and founder of East Coast Studio, a podcast production company which helps entrepreneurs enjoy the benefits of podcasting while making the process as smooth as possible. Since starting as a solo freelancer a decade ago, Joel's knowledge and skills evolved to grow the business to what it is today, notably through a major heart surgery in 2018, where he was forced to let go of the reins and fully trust the team he had built. Joel remains at the heart of the company, seamlessly balancing the distinctive challenges and freedoms that come with entrepreneurial work. So Joel, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I really appreciate it. It's going to be great talking to you about podcasts, which has sort of a weird inception thing going on, but it'll be a lot of fun. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much for being here.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Awesome. So, there's a lot of different parts of podcasts and a lot of different things. Let's start off with this. What's your ninja skill in podcasts? And then we'll go on from there.
I would say our ninja skill is doing all the production work so that the life of the podcaster is nice and simple and they can focus on what's important, because our main clientele tends to be entrepreneur type people. So they have a business to run. Anyone that's an entrepreneur, obviously, that like you have so many things in the run of a day that you want to do. Podcasting is a great medium to grow your business, network, whatever. There's a variety of benefits, but it can take a lot of time if you're doing it all on your own. So we aim to be a reliable, trustworthy team that can do the entire thing. So you do the recording, we take it, we edit it, write the notes, do the social media clips, publish it, and you can just trust that you don't really have to think much about your podcast beyond that. Everything is working well behind the scenes because of us. So that's our main thing that we focus on.
And I've got to be honest, with this podcast, there is a hell of a lot of work that goes into it. So, having somebody like you would be very, very helpful to help us do that thing we're really good at, and that's go out and actually talk to people. And so that is a very necessary part of podcasting. I think a lot of people don't realize that even if it's a very simple podcast and there's not a whole lot of glitz on it, it's still difficult. There's still a lot you do. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And there can be things you don't realize as well. Like one thing that I see commonly is thinking I can DIY it, but it actually doesn't really look that good or doesn't really sound that good. And, you think you know how to edit all of a sudden, even though I've done it for 10 years and went to school for it. You watched a 20-minute YouTube video, and I'm not, insulting these people, but it can think like, hey, I know how to edit now. And in reality, it's not really coming across that great. And that's really crucial for, say, someone in a professional role. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good thing to note.
Yeah. Having seen from, a DIY, like you said, a DIY podcast to seeing, I've had a couple of clients with like seriously legit $40,000 podcast studios. There is a big difference, and it's, you notice it.
Yes.
And the credibility is huge too. You kind of alluded to that. The credibility with having a really well done, well produced video or well produced podcast is really bigger than people think.
Yes. And the content is key, like valuable content that can make up for a lot of other things. You don't need a $40,000 studio to be great, but the important thing to remember as an entrepreneur is just that how valuable your time is. So if you're starting out and you don't have a lot of money, but you have time, then it makes sense to focus more on, okay, I kind of have to do this on my own for a bit until I could afford to perhaps outsource it. But there's definitely a point where you need to be very mindful of how you're spending your time and asking yourself, is this the best thing I can do with my time? Probably not. You have other things to do besides learning how to do editing. You can have someone else do that.
Exactly. And it goes back to something like you said, and kind of you alluded to there, where it was one of my clients told me one day, they're like, when you're rich enough to outsource, but it is something, when we first start off, we're always the chief everything officer of our company. And what is your job title? Yes. All the things.
Yeah.
And it really can drain, especially if you're operating outside of your zone of genius. Editing is not as easy as it looks. And, so it can be a problem.
And I don't think it's always necessarily an obvious transition to where you wake up one day and just go, hey, I'm able to outsource now. Like there can be a tight time where you maybe don't feel you have quite enough money to outsource, but also it's like you're kind of too busy. And if you don't find a way to offload that somewhere, you're never really going to have the time to work on your business in a way that grows your revenue. So that's a consideration, and I think a struggle that we face with as entrepreneurs. Not necessarily only with a podcast, but there's a whole lot of things in a business that we would need to do. And yeah, it can feel like a struggle sometimes to strike that balance.
Exactly. So now just, being on the other end of this and being, I think podcasts are a great example for this. When do you tend to find your audience, or what do you tend to find was the experience of the people you work with as far as that transition, especially the people that are like, I waited too long for this, or the folks that didn't implement quite the way they should have, or some, because I like to hear, I have a saying that, there are some people that are an example to do. There's some people that are an example of what not to do, but both are really good examples. And we can learn
Yeah.
from both of them. What are some of the things that you've seen? We're going to apply this to podcasts because that's your zone of genius, but we can apply it to just about anything. Like, did you see them going too fast, too slow? Where would you think that, seeing examples, where would you think that sweet spot would be?
Yeah, well, I can say a mistake, and I always hesitate when I give this advice because it's what I do. So it's easy for me to say, hey, work with a professional. But when I used to do a lot of launches, I would always say, hey, it's a great thing that you came to me to ask about this because, yeah, you can start out on a shoestring budget. I'm not saying that you can't, and you can DIY it. But again, if you're a professional and you're trying to make a good impression on people, you probably don't just want to slap it together and throw it out. There are arguments to be made for doing that, but I would always commend people like you did the right thing by at least just asking someone. Even if you don't decide to go down the route of paying for help and whatnot, it's a whole lot easier. I've seen the struggle when people don't. I've seen them like they've come to me with a mess. Like I didn't go to find a professional and now I have all this mess made and now I'm here. And so that's where I learned to basically tell people you should have just came to me 10 weeks ago or whatever the case. You can try to pass that message on to people who are like struggling and want to DIY it. And I get that because I'm that kind of person too. I want to understand how things work before I really let someone else handle it. And also, I don't know, I just kind of enjoy tinkering with that stuff. It's difficult to like, because I get it. I like to do some DIY, but there's lots of stuff as well. I like to just say, just get that away from me. I don't want to learn it. I want someone else to do it. So there's that. And then I'll also say, I see people in different positions. Like I had a surprise the other day, a client of ours who is like doing quite well with her business. She's growing. She's got all these ideas, pretty well established. And she started DIYing some of her podcast all of a sudden, and I thought, like, what's that about? I thought we're helping you. She said, I don't know, I found this software and I tried it, and maybe I'm done with you now and I can do my own podcast. And I said, well, okay, you could potentially do that, and let me try to give you some unbiased advice here. Most people that come to us at this point are in your position and they're too busy and they're trying to get our help. That's like you as a practitioner going and saying, you know what, forget the person I hired to take the phone calls and do the appointments. I want to do that instead of treat patients. Like it's backwards. It doesn't make sense. And she said, oh yeah. And to try to avoid me again, trying to push what I sell, I said, think about this in any other context, like any other area of your business. It doesn't have to be this podcast, but most people at your level, they should really be thinking about how to free up more time, not how to do it on their own. And by the way, what you did really wasn't that good. Kind of, so yeah, she realized then that kind of mistake in that line of thinking. But that's something that I would caution against for sure. I don't want to sound like a sales pitch, but again, apply this to anything in your business that you could potentially have help with. And I think I'm relieved of them sounding biased.
Yeah, well, it is true though, whatever it is. And so I'm using podcasts again because it's your zone of genius, but I think it's applicable to a lot of different things. And I've had to learn this the hard way, where, I am one of those people, like you said, where I like a limited functional knowledge of every aspect of my business. I might not be good at it, but I might do it for a little bit just to see to see how to do it so I can make an educated opinion on, or an educated decision on who I'm going to bring in as a pro to handle it. And so I generally understand a podcast is going to take this amount of time out of my day, and this is what it's going to be to record, and this is about how long it takes to edit, and this is about what I need to do. Just so I can make an educated decision. I think as entrepreneurs, we do that. We want to get as many data points as we can, and then we just make a decision. But we're talking about and I love what you said, where it's like, what are you going to be able to do? What is your zone of genius, and what are you going to be able to make the most money on? And as entrepreneurs, it is not editing podcasts. It is going out and
Mhm.
talking about what we talk about. For me, it's going out and talking about keynotes, and I will talk your ear off all day at it. It is absolutely something I love to do. Stay in that zone. And I've
Mhm.
noticed when I'm not in that zone, I've gotten myself super burned out when I'm trying to do things that I really should just outsource. I tried to edit my own videos, like shorts and things. That was not going well. That was a disaster. I ended up hiring somebody because I'm like, this is not going to work well for me because it's not my zone of genius. I now kind of know how to do it. I know what a turnaround time is for them. But yeah, there's some
Mhm.
places where stay in your lane.
And listen, I understand there's a challenge too when it comes to outsourcing.
Yeah.
Maybe you've been faced with this because I feel it too. When I know, take your own advice, go get someone to help with this, but you try to find someone and it just doesn't feel like I can really get someone who's doing what I want, or that whole I'll just do it myself, and I may not be doing a good job. But yeah, we're talking about this understanding that it's the ideal solution, but that's not to say it's simple to find a service provider in whatever this is, or whether it's an employee. It can take time, and it can be a challenge to find someone who's really on your wavelength and is able to execute exactly what you need. There's no doubt about that.
And as entrepreneurs, we were talking about this earlier, where there was a reason we left when we had our 9 to 5 and we moved on to an entrepreneurial, our 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Um, we build this identity around our companies. Our work-life balance is very, very different, where we are always on, we are always talking about it, we are always thinking about our companies, and we're just
Mhm.
really embedded in it. And one of the problems we run into is I think it turns into our child, and we don't want to let go of that. We have these major control issues and also this is our livelihood. If this screws up, we are effed. We're done.
Mhm.
And I think there comes this sort of, we become very reticent to turn anything over to anyone else because we have so much writing on this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting that of all the people in the world, we would be the ones that kind of need assistance growing your business, but
Yep.
then that whole relationship we have with our business causes us to kind of say no.
Yep.
I can't let anyone else do that. Now, that's not every entrepreneur, and I always am eager to learn from the ones who I see doing this well.
Mhm.
Um, it's something that I struggle with for sure, is that delegation
Yeah.
and just allowing other people to do things, especially when you just feel like it's only going to take me 20 minutes, I'll do it, but it adds up. But there's definitely people I've spoken to, and they're like, I don't do anything, man. I'm going to bed early, and like, but you have 2 7-figure businesses and you have real estate. How are you doing that? And I'm always eager to learn from those people because it's such a different mindset than I have. I'm like stuck in the I know I should do that, but I have no idea how you how you're actually doing it.
Mhm. Yeah, true story. And so now, to get back to your story a little bit, you have an interesting story about having to have let go of this. And I want to hear, first of all, so you had a major heart surgery in 2018. Tell me a little bit about what happened after that. Like, what were the series of events after that when you basically had to just trust in your team because you couldn't?
hmm Well, I probably didn't do as well of a job as I could have, because I will admit that I was in the hospital bed. I don't know if I was even awake 24 hours, and I had my laptop, and I was mainly watching Seinfeld, but I was keeping an eye on things, and I
That's
was
like the mark
there.
of an entrepreneur.
Yeah, and there's probably some book out there that says how bad that is or unhealthy that is for a person. But that was, like you said, it's my baby. I want to be involved, but I did in fact I had a team built up where I could trust that things were okay. Maybe at that point it wasn't like I could walk away for 6 months, but I
Mhm.
knew in this amount of time it was something, and I hoped that I would wake up. I guess that was a big point too. I mean, the surgery had a 99% chance of success, but there's always that little chance. And I hoped, yeah, because my brother is my business partner, and we had both had these nice lives created through the business. Nothing too luxurious, just freedom and
Yeah.
able to work for ourselves, which we really liked. And I wanted him to be able to continue that as well. So that played into my thought of, how do I make sure that this business, like, he knows how it works, and we have a team in place that can do this stuff without me. So
Mm.
yeah, I went from being just a freelancer at one point to not. I have no business background, so I kind of know I could read some books, but I didn't really know how to build out this business. But
Yeah.
eventually, we got a little team, grew that out. My brother joined, and leading up to the surgery, we thought, well, how can we make this a thing where I'm not required to be here because we have no choice.
Mhm.
And so we did that, and everything worked out well.
Yeah, I have to say I have a business degree, and it's marginally helpful.
That's good to know. I didn't waste any time there, hey?
Not much. Although I did have a guest on a little while ago who was has a degree from Sloan School of Management, which is MIT, and so Ivy Leagues. And he said they focus a lot more on on the entrepreneurial side of things, which I think is interesting, because
Mhm.
they see the difference. We learned about contingent workforces and and freelancers and stuff like that, but not to the level that they did. So it's really interesting that yeah, I only think it's marginally helpful.
Well, that's, I think a lot of schooling anyway is you don't become an expert in school. You kind of get your feet wet. You learn about these different things and you go out into the world. It's not like every entrepreneur out there is a pro at everything and would have had all the answers in what we were doing because you're always doing something new. The way we were building our business, podcasting was kind of new. There's a million softwares you could use. How do you scale this across a team to keep the quality up? It's not like you would necessarily get that answer in business school. Maybe you're a little better equipped to find the solution, but there's still a lot of trial and error and just figuring things out. So yeah, in that regard, school doesn't doesn't really give you that much. You still got to just be willing to try and learn.
Exactly. And I think that's a large part about being an entrepreneur is just poking the button and see what happens. Like, let's push this button,
Hmm.
see what happens, whether or not it's a good idea.
Yeah. Well, you find
Whether or not
out.
it's a big red button that says don't push, or, we're going to push it. That's how it works.
Hmm. Yeah.
But I think it's a different skill set. And while I don't regret getting that business degree because it allowed me to understand a lot of the background of things and how stock shares work. And there's some thing, some there are some skill sets that I can bring to the table because of that degree. Not quite at the point where I'm ready to implement them, but
Hmm.
we're there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, there's knowledge doesn't go to waste.
exactly. So how did you get into podcasting? Like, what
Mm,
was the series of events that led up to that?
that's a great question. Well, I always had an interest in music growing up and
Okay.
radio, so and audio technology, that type of thing. So came to the point in my life where I was wondering what should I do, and like professionally, you're a grown up. What do you do here? And I decided to go to an audio engineering program. I knew a lot about it, but I thought, I guess you're supposed to have a piece of paper or something on the wall, so might as well go do this, and then I'll have the paper and people can hire me, which isn't really how it works in that industry. But that was great. I graduated from there, had a bit of experience in different fields, like doing audio for TV, doing live concerts, recording studio, all these kind of things. So following that, I was able to go out in the world and get a little more experience and think about what I wanted to do. In the meantime, I was working a bar gig. I was doing sound for bands till 3 in the morning. That was, that got old. But I
Uh-huh.
started doing some voiceover work online as a freelancer, and I got my first bank deposit from that. And I thought, wow, how does that work? Like I just got money from the internet. Someone paid me to do something. That was crazy. And I like that. I like working for
Mhm.
myself. It wasn't really a career goal that I had, but I liked that freedom and had done a bit of it growing up. So I thought, how do I do more of that? How do I get more money here? And
Mhm.
so I'm browsing online and seeing like what services are out here that I could possibly offer. And podcast editing was one of them. So I did a bit of audio and general audio editing work, but podcast editing popped up.
Mhm.
And I did a bit of that. I really liked it. It doesn't require like the brain to work on, say, a full length music album, which to me is just too big. I
Mhm.
can't focus on that. I can't wrap my head around it. But a podcast episode is like a neat little package. You take one episode in, you do your work on it, and it's done. And I really like that. And so I got busier and busier with that work. Eventually was able to phase out the voiceover because you kind of need a stable studio for that. And I wanted to
Mhm.
travel a bit.
Yeah.
But as that grew and grew, I went from freelancer to the company, but that was really it. I just had that background. I landed in podcasting at the right time and just went from there.
Yeah, I love how you made that transition to the freelancer. I did that as well, and then
Hmm.
started up the company and started up a bunch of things. But I think it's a great transition because it lets you dip your toe in the pool. You're still technically have the stability of having like I had clients at the time, so it's like I have people that were with me for the longer term, so I knew I had that stable income coming in. I pick up a side hustle client every now and then, but then transitioning into the business was a little bit different. I think it was a nice kind of training wheels to
Yeah.
get you
And
used
like,
to it. Yeah.
yeah, like we were saying, I didn't have a big plan. Like, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to start a company, I'm going to do this. Work in podcasting. It didn't really even exist when I went to school. It was just, you just figure it out along the way. That looks cool. That's
Yeah.
money. Okay. And oh, this is nice.
That's what I love about being an entrepreneur. It's like, let's go do this cool thing. Let's see what happens. It
Yeah.
could be a raging success. It could be a raging failure, but we'll learn something from it. We get this level of tenacity that most people don't have as entrepreneurs, but it's also just fun to kind of see, let's go change the world with something. Let's go see what we can do.
It's
Yeah.
so fun, and I'm very grateful for that, to have that liberty to be able to experiment and try different things. And depending on, I guess, your revenue and your profit is the scale that you can experiment. But for me, for example, I like making little videos and playing with audio equipment and stuff. But when it's easy to get sucked into your business and just focus on the work and not get to kind of mess around sometimes. But recently, I wanted to start making some Instagram content, so I bought like a little microphone. Like, oh, this is fun. I remember it's kind of like the passion reignited in me for how
Mhm.
fun this can be. You mess around with that. I'm going out with this stick, taking videos at the park and editing them together and laughing at it. So it's cool. Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
like arguably my job. I can't do it all day, every day, but there's a portion of time you can reserve to do those kind of things. And yeah, it's a lot more fun than just working in an office for someone else and being upset. Not that you have to be upset working at those kind of jobs, but I say for people like us, we like
Mhm.
this lifestyle better.
We think different. And I call those staff development days.
Mm-hmm.
I just go
Yeah.
out and do the really cool stuff that we got the hustle. I got, I have to do my regular, the regular job, but my grind. But I also realized that after getting super burned out, realizing I need that we have a passion for what we do and we
Mm-hmm.
need to nerd out to it. We need to go see what other cool stuff we can come up with. And as visionaries, I think that's our job, is going out and coming up with the new stuff. And so,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, at least once a week, because I never actually take days off. It's more, I get one day
Same.
a week to myself as a staff development day to go out and do my thing and
Mm-hmm.
then just try new stuff. And I have a big whiteboard and I'll cover it. And, it's like, who was it in? It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the whiteboard and mapping everything out. Sorry, I forget the meme. You'd know the meme if you saw it, but it's just like this
Yeah.
wild, crazy, mad scientist moment when I'm trying to figure all
Mm-hmm.
this out.
People are relying on us to do that. I think maybe that's something that is a common trait amongst entrepreneurs, is that creativity in a way. And because they want the answers, and we don't necessarily have them unless we go experiment or learn. So I've felt additional pressure lately, which is good. Again, it's kind of it's given me a lot of passion to stay on top of what's happening in the podcast space. How are things evolving? Learn from other people in this space. Try some things on my own, because that's how you can best serve your clients. When they come to me, I have all this knowledge and I have it to share on social media. That's another reason why I feel compelled to do that. But yeah, they want us doing that behind the scenes, and I guess they don't really care how you arrive at the conclusion, but you're doing it. You're doing something that ends up being valuable to them.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always terribly paraphrase this quote, but it gets the gist of it. It's like what Steve Jobs said at his address to Stanford graduation is we're the ones who are crazy enough to change the world. We're like the mad
Hmm.
scientists
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
labs
And
doing crazy things.
it takes bravery. It definitely takes a special kind of person to dive into being an entrepreneur.
It does. It truly does. But it's, for me, I don't know if you have the same experience, but for me, I would not have it any other way. This is so much fun. It's hard. It's definitely
Hmm.
like hard mode, but it is so much fun to try to just do a bunch of cool stuff with your friends. Let's go create something, you
I
know.
agree. And one of the things that was most appealing to me was, like, when I used to work jobs, I would be so passionate about it. I would stay late and I
Yeah.
would be working. I just felt like I can't let this be late. I can't let my colleague down or whatever. And you never got paid any extra for that,
Hmm.
but I was passionate about what I was doing. When you're an entrepreneur, if you're doing the right things, you can put as much time into the business as you want, and you'll hopefully get a payoff. So I
Hmm.
like that. I don't mind working 7 days a week and many long hours. You get some freedom as well, but yeah, that's better. I can work harder and I get something back for it, which is great. If you're a passionate person and you like what you do, that's ideal. Not to make no more money. Not that it's all about money, but yeah.
It's creating cool stuff. And oh, by the way, I get paid a lot more than I would. I can build something. It's mine.
Hmm.
Have this cool thing. Yeah. And
Yeah.
if it's like for me, it's Wednesday mornings. I start formal work at 10 a.m. I enjoy it because that's, I need that little extra time in the day and I can make those adjustments. I
Hmm.
can, but then I'll bump up my day so that way I'm ending at like 7 p.m. And it's just that, I can make those adjustments as needed. I have a hell of a lot more freedom. And I am entirely responsible for my own money, which is great because, like you said, there's some people that want to go out there and start traveling, and there's others that really want to just build things as big as you want, and you can do it however the hell you want. It's your choice.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah,
know?
and our lifestyle sounds so unappealing to some people, or the idea that we work that much or that many days. But let me tell you, I can take whenever I want. If I want to go, if I have to go to an appointment, or I want to go to the gym in the afternoon when it's not busy, I can do whatever I want. And I will take my work schedule over being forced to be at a job from 9 to 5 every day. I will take my life any day over that. I would way rather work extra hard to get that in return. Like I have some family coming to town. I can go out with them every day of the week. I'm
Yeah.
going to check in. I've got my team working, but we're going to go out and have fun. I don't need to request time off and get rejected or anything. I am in control, and I don't mind working for that whatsoever.
Yes, absolutely. Because we know it's going to pay off it's that short term kind of hustle for the long term payoff in the future. Yeah.
And I think it's important to remember to enjoy right now as well, because I am so guilty of just getting super sucked into working constantly. It's like, I gotta get this, I gotta get, grow this, make more of this. But why am I doing that again? Oh yeah, for freedom. So, it's a nice sunny day. Go outside for a bit.
Yes.
Don't get
Exactly.
too obsessed. Remember why you're even doing it in the first place. So yeah, trying to find that balance, although it's difficult when we like to work. It's odd.
Well, that's why I bought an iPad for that reason. I call it my mobile unit, so I can go
Hmm.
right on two Great Lakes here, so I can go out to one of the Great Lakes and just kind of sit out and do my job there. I'm still working, but it's also I can do it in a remote location. And I think honestly, when we're in 9 to 5s, I think we're at like 3 hours of productivity, and that's it. It's all
Hmm.
you're gonna get out of people at a 9 to 5. For us, we're much more productive. You know.
Yeah. Oh, we're gloating a lot here, but it is a great life, isn't it?
It really is. I would not have it any other way. Once I learned what entrepreneurs were and how we worked, and that my brain was just wired differently. It wasn't that
Hmm.
anything was wrong. It was just for years hearing that the same, you go to work, you get your degree, you do your thing, hearing that same thing. And it didn't make sense. As soon as I read, it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the book that did it for me, where I understood. It was one of those few books in my life where I felt both judged and understood.
Hmm.
I understood what this was, just totally different way of thinking. And as soon as
Yeah.
that happened, it just opened up a floodgate and caused a lot of, made it so that I'm in a place that I'm very happy. And if people are happy in a 9 to 5 job, and I know some that are, good, go do it. Good, awesome. I'm really happy for you. You need, that's your zone. This is obviously your calling and you need to go do it. But for me, it was something different. And I think we need entrepreneurs or budding entrepreneurs or soon to be entrepreneurs need to hear that. We need to
Absolutely. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing it either way. There's so many people in the world. We're all going to have different feelings about it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a job. I don't want one.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So we're getting towards the end of the podcast here. And there's, of course, talking about books. One question that I always ask every person, and that is, what is one book or podcast that has had a major impact on your life that you can share with the audience?
Hmm. Yeah, there all the big ones, of course, are like Rich Dad Poor Dad you just mentioned. I've read a lot of any of those big ones. I'm sure
Sure.
we've all probably read them. So I was
Uh-huh.
thinking of something a little different, but this one actually did have a big effect on my life. It's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. It's by Dr. Joe Dispenza.
Mhm.
It's fairly well known, but not necessarily that everyone would have heard of it. And I was reading up a bit about that, to refresh my mind because I tend to forget all these things over the years. Like, what are the key points of that book? Although you read it at the time and it influenced your life, and it's essentially about mindset and how powerful your mindset can be when you're telling yourself the right things or the wrong things, or envisioning, say, the kind of person that you are. So I don't need to give a giant summary, but it's definitely worth the read, and it's a little controversial. That's one of
Mhm.
the things I was reminded of when I read it. Now, the Amazon reviews are great, but you can find threads out there, people just complaining, this guy is full of it, this doesn't make any sense. And I don't necessarily agree with everything he says in the book. Some of it does seem a little out there to me. Everything, of course, is open to criticism, so I'm not knocking anyone who criticizes it. But I get the feeling from some of those people that there are people that just like to have excuses for
Yes.
their own, for them to just go comfortably sit on the couch and watch Netflix at night. This book has to be full of crap. That guy has to be lying. That guy, well, he had money from his family to start his business. I could never do that. Like, they need to tell themselves those things so they can live with just being mediocre. So
Yes.
I was thinking about that as I was reading these comments about the book. Like, sure, maybe it's not 100% truth. I don't know. But it had a big effect on my life, because you can tell yourself a story that you suck and you can't do anything. Or you can tell yourself another story, have confidence that you can do it. There's just so much in that book that affected how I went about my life. So I highly recommend checking it out.
And I think you brought up a really interesting and a really good point there, where I think we see I call them we see people from the outside who aren't in the entrepreneurial space really either lashing out at entrepreneurs, or, oh, this person's bad for this reason, or, these sorts of things, or, oh, I could never do that, and this sort of thing. And as entrepreneurs, we see that, and we see that as basically somebody getting triggered and somebody having a problem. This is something you need to look at. I had a mentor of mine say that to me once, and it was probably one of the most powerful statements. It says, if you're triggered about something, that's something you need to work on. And there are some people that aren't really able, or they're not in a place in their life where they can actually look at it, so they have to make the other person the bad guy. And I see this a lot with entrepreneurs, because it looks like we're arrogant. That's not it. We've been kicked in the gut and stood up. I'm not done yet. So many different times. There's a level of resilience, which looks like arrogance to some people. But I think it's, maybe, I would love to reach out if there was any way to do it to these, if there's any way to effectively do it with these folks and not do more damage, to say, maybe you need to look at that. Why are you reacting like this?
Yeah. And hey, everyone's in their own place in life. Everyone's welcome to do whatever they like, but I kind of like to be aware of where they're coming from if I'm going to read that, because I could think, oh yeah, that book is full of crap, but no, wait, who is this person and what's their perspective? And there's all kinds of anecdotes about people like that, who you call them haters or whatever, because that's something maybe we struggle with. If you have to open up and put yourself out there, what if someone says something mean? Well, guess what? It's the internet, and lots of people do that. In my experience, the ones that are writing that stuff are not really doing a whole lot productive, like in their life. So, don't get too hung up on those comments. I wish them well. It's fine. But generally successful people are not out on YouTube typing comments on videos. Negative comments on videos. It's just
A good friend of mine had a bunch of shirts made that says "haters need hugs too." That's really it.
Yeah, I know. It's easy to get hung up on that stuff. Like, obviously, I've seen some of that on my own, my own postings. Like, as soon as I start, I'm like, I'm going to put myself out there. We're going to make an Instagram. We're going to make a YouTube. You post like your first video, and then it's just some negative thing. Okay, well, that's, if you're not getting any kind of comment like that on the internet, you're not doing enough. Like, it just comes with the territory. So if you haven't gotten a comment that you felt bad about, you haven't done enough. So keep going.
Yeah. And seeing it as that person's problems, the manifesting. And I think that's the number one thing that I learned about negative publicity and these negative comments. There are some very angry, bitter people out there, and understanding it's their crap, not mine.
Yeah.
And looking at them from this, I really hope that you find some sort of resolution to this. That's why I wanted to say things very carefully, like, be able to make it known that we're not judging. It's just that this is your thing. That's why I said, if there was a way that I could get to them, it wasn't just a physical thing, like actually, finding an email address and sending something off to them. It's if they could hear it, if there would be something positive that would come, or it would just feed a beast that does not need to be fed. Right.
Yeah. I like I said, I wish all of those types of people well. I wish well in the world. I can't help everybody, but I know, like, we can affect change in our own lives and the people we care about, and anyone that comes into our life. As an example, if someone shows up and they could use some guidance and you have something to share, that's great. Maybe you'll learn from them too. But yeah, it's I
like to leave people in a better condition than I found them.
That's always a good way to live. Yeah.
Yep. So Joel, thanks again for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This is a great chat. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Joel, check out the link in the description.